don't be alarmed if you hear any sort of screams in the background here, because this is a game that sort of aims to challenge the player a lot. Titan Souls, we first saw it at E3, and I think my cameraman managed to make it through all 4 bosses in one run. He was very proud of that. I think that was his favorite moment of all E3. But of course, you didn't want to sort of leave that challenge in there. You brought out the most difficult boss of the game, in your own words, to show here at Gamescom.
Sorry,
what's that boss? The most difficult one that you're bringing?
Oh right, yeah, we've got the Yeti in it, which is a snow area boss, and it's just like a level up over the first 4 that you get to see. You saw at E3, so it moves very quickly. I don't know if you'd like to see that now, maybe, and get that in the background.
Through the magic, we'll edit that in.
Well, okay, cool, yeah. Yeah, it's just way faster, and so the way the game's structured is if you have the first 4 Titans in the first area, and then it opens up into a more expansive world, and you get to explore in different areas. But after that point, all the Titans are like a level higher in terms of difficulty to keep it challenging. So I think one person has beaten it so far at E3, because we had a few developers testing it just to see how it was, and it took them 18 goes, 18 deaths. So that's the kind of difficulty to expect from it.
So is it, when you design something that's meant to be difficult, where's the point where you say, like, you want it to be difficult still when you figured out what to do, and it's not just about figuring out what to do, but actually once you've figured that out, it's still going to be very difficult to do?
Yeah, execution of it is the main thing. This is the difficult part of it. Some of them have puzzle elements to them, so working out how to actually do it, like checking out their sort of patterns of movement. And when you understand the fight, that's when you can actually do the kill. But still pulling it off, the timings are always very tight, and it's definitely a challenge to do it then, even if you know what to do. Yeah.
And then when you take the game around like this, do you see a lot of sort of players doing things that you weren't expecting on how to solve these things, or is it the kind of game where there is really one solution that's the optimal way of dealing with it?
There's definitely different ways of actually pulling off kills. There's always an optimal solution, so I'm looking forward to when the game's released, seeing how people speedrun it. I think that's going to be a fun thing, because when there's an exposed weak spot, they can get kills very quickly if they know what they're doing, but they're always really difficult to pull off. So there's usually like maybe a few different kinds of windows, so you've got like a very small window of maybe about 5 or 6 frames to actually pull off a kill, and then sometimes it would be they'd pause for a little bit longer on certain parts, so it's like more like 30 frames, but even those windows are still pretty hard to hit. So there'll definitely be different ways to actually pull off kills.
How do you envision it? Because as far as I understand it, you got those first 4 bosses, and then it opens up, and you're pretty much free to sort of roam yourself. Will you be stringing players along in some sort of central, line, or is it just free to sort of explore?
It'll just be free to roam around after that point. Like, the first 4 Titans we consider to be like a tutorial for the game. So after that point, they'll go along and just explore everywhere. A bit like Zelda 1 on the NES. You sort of dropped into a world and you can explore in any direction, and you can kill the Titans in any order. So when you go off, you'll explore, you'll maybe find a save point, like a hub. So that's where you'll respawn. So there'll be a few, if you find a save point, there'll usually be a few Titans around that area. So like the area we've got on here extra to show is the snow area, which has that. So it has the hub in the middle and a few other Titans spread around to find and kill. But yeah, there's no like direct route to go to any place really. We don't guide the player; they just explore and find it on their own. But also, when you go through an area, you might find a shortcut to another area and link things like that. So as you explore, you'll find yourself like looping back on yourself in the world and finding new places to go.
But the game is really all about the bosses, right? There's no grunts in there, is there?
No, there's no grinding really. The only thing that comes close to grinding is respawning when you die. So when you die, you go back to the checkpoint, you have to run back to the boss, which is basically as a punishment for dying. So, because it's not hard, make it a bit harder, they have to go all the way back to the boss, but the boss runs aren't too far. But that's the kind of Dark Souls like bonfire run mechanic, so you've lost, you've died, and you have to go back and run again as a punishment. So when you're in the fight, you're thinking, I don't want to die because I don't want to have to run back and lose like 10, 20 seconds doing it again. So it makes you try to be more careful in the fight, so you try and survive more.
So it's kind of nice to see that sort of, because for a long time video game design was all about sort of making every player happy. But this is really about just making those players who love that challenge happy, and not really catering to the others, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. If you don't like to be challenged, this isn't the game for you, I don't think, because you have to like persevere with it if you want to beat it. But I think people get a taste of it and they just want to keep going. You know, you get that thing of, okay, just one more go, and then you think, I just need to kill this one boss. So it has that kind of addictive quality to it. And that was pretty much where I was going with that.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously there's a setting and there's a backdrop there. Is there any sort of story motivation that sort of to motivate the player, or is that sort of, or is it purely the idea of besting these bosses?
Yeah, I think the player's motivation is mostly just like wanting to beat the game. So when you get going, you just want to keep fighting them.
No pretenses of...
No, there's no like direct story straight off the bat. As you go through the game, you find out more about the world and the character, and you get a taste for like what's going on, why you're here, where you are, and those things are sort of subtly told in the background. So the storytelling is told by the environment rather than like cutscenes or text and things like that. So you just, it's open to interpretation really, like as you go along. If you really want to find out more about the world, you keep looking for it. You have to work it out yourself. So
you'll see it several times going forward, trying to beat the game. So you have time to ponder the environment.
Yeah. Maybe when you're running back to the boss after dying, you'll be able to look around and think, oh, maybe this means this, or like with the snow boss, the Yeti, you might see evidence of the Yeti walking around the world. So you see like maybe discarded fish bones or something like that, or footprints maybe, and you'll build a picture of like what's going on in this place. So
what's going on in development? Where are you at right now, and sort of how much left do you have to sort of flesh out the game?
We've done around half of the bosses that we intended to do, maybe a little bit more than half at the moment that are actually made. We have the designs down for a few more after that, and then just general ideas for stuff. So we just like to play around, see what works. If it doesn't work, we throw it away and do something else. So we try to make sure everything is actually different and fun. So we don't want to have like repetition in the game. Like, so each Titan is completely different, and they have different mechanics, and they use the arrow in different ways. Like seeing the brain fight, there's certain things with the arrow and fire, and there's a few more fights in the game that use the arrow in ways that you wouldn't have expected it to be used.
It's very interesting, that approach of just locking it down to that one weapon and making sure that there's still variation in there, because it's a more challenging way of bringing variation to a game, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing though. Like the challenge of overcoming, you've got this restriction. The restriction itself is like breeds like innovation. You have to think of weird ways to use this one thing to make it interesting, and doing like just crazy things. Like the fact that you have only got one arrow means the variation in the game comes from the boss fights themselves. So that means we have to make the bosses really wildly different and interesting. So that definitely helps the game.
So there's not like, 2 hours in you get this new mechanic and you get to explore that, and then 2 hours later.
Yeah, we were thinking, maybe in-app purchase for an extra arrow, maybe £100 or an extra hit point.
The gods will be watching. Guys had to put in a mercy mode, so you never know.
We're not merciful, so that won't happen. Yeah.
All right. So what platforms are you bringing it out on? What are you working on right now in terms of platform?
I do the PC stuff, and we're also getting it ported to PS4 and Vita as well. So it'll be PC, Mac, Linux, Vita, PS4 are the full titles.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Cheers for having me.